So it'll be interesting, Susan, to compare what we find because our families, there are, I think, close to 50 of them, are all poor, urban, and almost all African American. So,
Yeah.
similar type of study design. So if you contact me, I'll send you some details of what we did because we're kind of on the
back
finishing
side.
end.
Yeah, and I'll say I'm not the PI on this project, just a collaborator on this project, but I'm excited to be involved with it. Yeah, I'm not sure exactly how they're going to get out a measure of waste of the box. I think they're going to just be asking, because I think that is super important. In these communities, there would likely not be waste, but they would give the food away. Like it would just be given to a neighbor or a friend or something if it's something they didn't want. So, and of course, they're not necessarily all carotenoid rich foods. It's just collections of fresh.
Well, you'll get a good idea about what people prefer based on what
Yeah.
they want more of and what they don't use.
Yeah, that it made me, like I saw you had your hand up, and then Amy, Susan, I'm curious, are the foods just what can be procured easily, or are they specific foods that are
Yes.
Eaten by this community? Or
Yeah, so the community collaborate, they're a partner. This is a community-based participatory research study funded by NIH. So they've been very actively involved in, they actually have a farm. And so a lot of now their farm doesn't have production to the scale that would be needed. So there is the tribal partner worked with the research team to what foods they already prepare on their farm and what foods are available, and then what foods they would want. And so that's where that came from. So it's not just foods that are accessible, and there's a set A box and B box for each month. So they would get A week, B week, A week, B week, and then that would different boxes for different the 4 months. And then there's recipes that are focusing on indigenous foods and indigenous ways of knowing with food. And so how do we know what they eat of the box? I think we're just asking them, because we're not weighing the boxes. I think I saw that in the chat. And then there is a food vendor called Go Fresh that is available to us here and that would have each of these foods. So we had to find a food vendor that would also have each of the foods. Now, I will say the foods in the boxes are not, like the fresh stuff is not particularly, it's just stuff that you could probably also find at the grocery store. It's not anything that would be foraged or anything. So, it's just regular onions and watermelons and things. Like it's not food that would be not indigenous, because but it's not something that would be very hard to get. So lots of the foods that we consume would be First Americans foods too. So thanks for those questions.
It's a great sounding study design. I can't wait for your update on this, hopefully soon. Linka, did you still have a question? Your hand was up before.
Yes, I just wanted to make a comment, just given the results, and our results are preliminary, but it was just fascinating to see the lack of associations with the fruit intake self-reported and the Veggie meter scores, and then also the fact that I'm just wondering about the level of carotenoids in these 100% fruit juices that people consume, and whether what is the difference between the types of juices, and was it it did not show up in the Veggie meter scores. There were no differences, but there was a self-reported difference, and we had much higher intake of fruit juice in our participants who identified as Black or African American, and there was a big difference compared to other groups. And so I'm just really curious about kind of get deeper into the data and see what's going on there and what explains it.
Need to bring some food scientists in here who can help us really suss out those differences, right? Lou, you've had your hand up. Did you want to add something?
Yeah, I was going to make a comment and ask a question, and it really relates to what some of the last discussion has been. My own take for the last couple of years has been that Veggie meter validation has been sufficiently performed, at least at the degree of satisfying reviewers for grants or publications. And that helps in terms of costs, and certainly, if one, wanted to measure circulating carotenoids, let's say, it allows one to do non-invasive clinical trials. We, for instance, for other measures, try and use saliva as much as possible, not for carotenoids, at least not yet. But the other issue comes in, what's the relationship between intake, because we're not measuring absorption, intake and score. I think what's fairly clear is that the time from adjusting, in effect, carotenoid intake, fruit and vegetable intake, to seeing changes in a sequestered area, be that Veggie meter, or, looking at changes in human milk, looking at optical density in the macula, looking at circulating carotenoids, anything, that's a period of perhaps a few weeks. It's certainly not usually a period of a few months. So that helps with intervention trials, or like this implementation trial that you just heard about, and that what we're doing. So I think, for us, the struggle has been how to assess intake. And I opted for the ASA 24, as I mentioned, and I'm curious about other people's, views on different instruments, because different ones have their own advantages, problems, degrees of validation. We chose the ASA 24 because, although not particularly in the populations that we're looking at, but more, generally, there's a long history of validation in its various iterations. They've got really good service through the NCI when you run into trouble. And it allows for a much more granular assessment of both foods and nutrients, for example, micronutrients. Then you could break it down. It breaks down 5 or 6 different carotenoids. It's meant, it's ASA, it's meant to be self-administered. We don't do it as self-administered. We do it as administration in front of the computer terminal, along with another investigator, often an RD, who's doing it. So we can get by some of these issues of exactly what was it, how big was the plate, how big was the glass, what are other things. I'm impressed by the ASA 24 at how granular you can get down on things that are important in this area, like the types of fats that go into the diet and how much. Not for this implementation trial, but for the breast milk and maternal diet study. We are going to look at absorption metabolism a little bit by a panel of salivary SNPs that are involved with carotenoid and fat metabolism, a few other things. It's hardly personalized nutrition. But anyway, I think people use different heuristics in this area. We want to make sure we do the ASA 24 at least twice and have those be separated by at least a couple of weeks. But what do people think?
That paper Marcelo was just mentioning, we used a tool called Diet ID, which uses a picture algorithm, and it takes a minute for a person, and it's certainly not granular, it's dietary patterns, but we did see really strong correlations. I shouldn't say really strong. I don't remember the actual correlation numbers. We saw statistically significant and acceptable correlations. It's, if you need granular intake, that's not the tool to use, but if you're trying to actually have people complete it, it takes literally, I think, 1 to 3 minutes, maybe. It's very fast. But again, just patterns of intake.
Yeah, that's versus 30 some odd to 40 some odd minutes.
Right. I don't want to cut this short if other people want to share responses to Lou's question of what tools are being used. I do want to get to Amy's question, though, so perhaps we can have chat responses of the tools that are used for dietary data collection so that Amy can ask her question or comment.
Or you can add it in. I started a little sticky, so you can throw it in the sticky as well, so we can document that. Did you want to ask your?
Yeah, so I am also interested, well, I really think that what we need is feeding studies so that we can really validate on what people are actually eating, because we know what they report is really not accurate. And I work with, well, I'm a member of the National Association for Research Nutritionists, and there's quite a few of them that are involved in the feeding studies related to the All of Us Precision Nutrition Initiative. So I'm definitely interested in getting Veggie meters to them as well. So I don't know if there's any update from a post last spring on that, or who's working on that, or if anyone knows anything. I don't really understand what, if that is nutrition precision and that they're looking at that. I'm not sure why they don't have Veggie meters.
Great question.
Yeah, and
guessing
I don't remember who posted that particular sticky from the last forum, but that is a good question. Or if anyone knows of any conversations related to the Nutrition Precision Initiative and whether Veggie meter has been mentioned. I have not heard it in those conversations personally.
I mean, when I'm using the Veggie meter, people are saying, well, I eat, cucumbers and apples. And so, to me, the feeding study could help us with, regression equations to say, include all, it's not just the carotenoids that are good or healthy and preventing disease. So that's what I would love to see.
Yeah, I mean, you bring up a great point. I mean, the Veggie meter might not capture some of that, but the, knowing what people are eating certainly is of value. So we have two more topics and we're running a little bit short on time. The next topic, Alicia, I don't know if you're still on the call. You are, great. The next topic, if Virginia, you want to advance to the next.
Yeah, I'll go back and fix that particular sticky note next time. Let me advance real quick. Okay, go ahead.
Is an update on the child-sized finger cradle. And so I was hoping, Alicia, it seems like maybe you've been in communication with Werner and can share with us. But it looks like you shared a note, but if you want to unmute and share with us, that would be really helpful.
Yeah, I'd be interested in hearing what other people have to say too, but I've been trying to get a finger cradle from him for a while. Werner's contact information has changed from what I had from him before when I bought my Veggie meter. So his email is different and I can send it out and maybe we can put that into the listserv so that everybody has his current information. Their office has also changed. So they're in a different place on campus at the University of Utah. So Werner said they only have one child finger cradle left. They dug around and dug around and dug around. If they get a lot of requests for that, they would go back to the folks who had done the laser printing for the ones that they've sent out so far, and they can have more made, but they felt like there was no demand for it. And I was thinking, wait a second, I was on this last call and lots of people were asking about this. So I think it's this miscommunication that he doesn't realize that a lot of people are interested in having the smaller finger cradles. So again, once I post his current email, if you want one, reach out to him about it, because I think they just aren't aware of the interest.
Well, I think a lot of us who wanted to use it contacted him and he was sending them for free. But I mean, like, we would want another one. I mean, they're really more intended as infant and young child than child per se. I mean, they're really necessary for like a 1-year-old.